Hey, I'm Barrett, Holland. I'm our Walkertown campus pastor at Revo Church, and I'm excited to share with you 3 ways that God has been prompting me and our local church to get outside of the Christian bubble. Now, many of you are probably familiar with this. Being inside a Christian bubble just means, hey, sometimes it's easy for us to live and conduct our week, our routines in a way where we're really just surrounded by Christians and we're not actively engaging people who might be far from God. But God's been pressing on me in that, and I'm excited to share with you 3 ways that we've been able to get outside of that Christian bubble even during this COVID season. Now, the first way is partnering with a local pro-life ministry. They're called Not Forgotten Ministries. And what's really cool about this ministry model is the folks who do this ministry actually go to the sidewalk, to these street corners around our local abortion clinic in Winston-Salem, and they engage in a loving, humble, compassionate way those who are considering going in to get abortions. We know which days they perform abortions locally. We know that people who are doing that often feel that they are in a crisis situation, and we know that that is a place where we can get outside of the Christian bubble, step in, and help someone experience the love of Christ. So I began volunteering with this ministry, and I'll tell you, hey, it was out of my comfort zone. It was not an easy thing for me at first, but I'm so glad that I have, and a great story that's come out of that. About a month ago, I was at our group. This is a Revo small group. We do prayer, Bible study, just community life together, and we were doing the story of the prodigal son. You've probably heard it. It's a story that Jesus tells where the father in the story, who represents God, has 2 sons. The younger of those sons asks for his inheritance early, a total slap in the face to the father, and then goes out and spends that inheritance on reckless living. He's far from God, making terrible life choices, gets to a rock bottom point, and he recognizes, man, I've just totally messed up my life. I need to try to return to my father. And as he's returning to his father, he's making up in his mind all of these ways that he's going to try to earn his way back into his father's favor, sort of a works-based righteousness type of thinking. But what's amazing in the story is the father, who still loves the son, who still is committed to the son, sees the son coming home, and when the son is still a long way off, the father lifts up his robes, he humbles himself, and he runs to that son. He embraces him in a huge hug. He says, "Son, you're mine. I love you. I've never quit on you. Come back home." It's an incredible story Jesus tells about the love that God has for us in Jesus. So we're going through this story in my R group, and that night I'm praying at the end of the R group meeting, and I'm asking God, how would you have me apply this text to my life? And God's Spirit put on me, you need to go, Barrett, tomorrow and volunteer with this pro-life ministry. Now, I'll admit to you, I didn't want to go. It was going to be a cold, rainy day the next day. I didn't really want to be there. I had a busy schedule. I had a lot of meetings on my calendar. I knew it was going to be a sacrifice, but I just had this image of the father running towards a son who was a long way off, and I knew this is what the church is called to do. Get outside of the bubble and love people who are hurting, people who might be a long way off from God. So I went the next day, went out to go volunteer. The weather was as expected, very cold, rainy, not a fun place to be, but I was really surprised that when I got out to the sidewalk, to the street corner there were no other volunteers. Now, there are always volunteers out there. There's kind of a shift change thing between the different volunteering time slots, so it was very surprising that there was no one there. I texted the volunteer coordinator. My hands are shaking. It's cold outside. And I said, "Hey, where is everyone? I'm out here to volunteer outside the abortion clinic." She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Because you didn't register to volunteer in advance, I couldn't warn you, but given the bad weather, we actually canceled volunteering today, so no one else is coming out." Well, I'll admit to you, I was a little bit relieved. I thought, well, okay, there you go. I tried to obey God, but it's fine. I'll go home. I won't have to deal with this weather anymore. So I texted a friend, our group leader, who was going to come out and volunteer with me, and I said, "Hey, just so you know, the volunteering is, it's all canceled for today, so I'm going to head out." And he said, "Well, hold on, wait a minute. You're out there? There are no other volunteers?" Well, hold on, I'll come volunteer with you. We can do it together. We can be the two people out there to volunteer together. I thought, no, I was looking for an out. And here my friend from Revo is saying, no, I'll come out and volunteer with you. Well, it just so happens that the director of the program named Tori was in the office that day. She's never in the office on Fridays when I normally volunteer. So we go up to the office, we get all the materials that we need to volunteer, and we go back out to the sidewalk. Now I'm out there for, no kidding, just about 15, maybe 20 minutes at the most, and a car pulls up. So I motion for the car to stop, and I've got my whole spiel that I'm going to tell the driver, hey, I'm with an organization. We've got free resources for families, anything from material needs like diapers and formula to medical needs like pregnancy tests, ultrasounds, anything that you need. We'd love to be able to provide free resources because we believe there's a much better choice for you and for your family than going forward with an abortion today. So I've got my whole spiel rehearsed. The driver pulls up, and the driver actually stops, and that's kind of unusual. Sometimes they'll just blow right past you. This driver stops. This driver rolls down the window, and I look into the car, and I notice, I know this person. It's a young man driving. He immediately recognizes me as well, and he says, Barrett? I said, yeah, what's going on? I look, there's a young lady sitting in the seat next to him. Two young folks, obviously scared, obviously feeling overwhelmed at their situation. We start talking, and this young man that I know, he's a professing Christian. He's been connected with our church. In the past, I hadn't seen him for about a year and a half, but as we start to talk, it turns out, yes, they are in fact in a crisis situation. They have an unexpected pregnancy on their hand, and they're feeling overwhelmed. They're telling me, we don't have jobs, we don't have a place to live, we don't have the parental models that would show us how to take care of a baby. We're not married, we don't have the pieces in place to be able to bring this baby into the world. And so they're looking at abortion as the easy way out, as an escape from what seems like a really overwhelming situation. But we start to talk about Jesus. We start to talk about hope, and we start to talk about how God makes a way when it seems that there's no way. And we're going back and forth, and I'm telling him, look, you got to understand, I'm not coming at you from a place of judging you. Like, I've made every mistake you can make in life, but I've learned this, that when we trust God, he provides for needs. He provides everything that we need to do the right thing. And look, I don't want to judge you, but I'm telling you, there's a right thing and there's a wrong thing to do here. There's something that's going to give you life, and there's something that's only going to hurt. And I want you to make the right choice. We go back and forth, and finally I tell him, look, Tori, the director of the organization that I'm serving with, she's just up around the street. Her office is just a block and a half down the street. And she would love to share with you about the free resources. She, in fact, herself had an abortion some 20 years ago. She's very open with it, and she'll tell you it's the worst decision she's ever made. So much guilt and shame in her life. But God's restored her, and I believe that God will make a way for you. Would you just go talk to Tori? And they're really struggling with the decision. And finally, he gets to the point, he says, no, I can't go talk to her. We can't go talk to her right now. We have to talk to each other. Well, I'm a little bit disappointed, but I got his contact info, and I said, well, just don't go into the abortion clinic. Just think about it. Pray about it. So he pulls off, and I'm really worried he's going to turn right into the clinic. He's driving like 2 miles per hour. I'm like, why are you driving so slow, man? Just drive away. I'm praying and praying and praying. He keeps driving down to the end of the street where my Revo friend is, and he turns off out of my line of sight. I called my Revo friend at the end of the street, and I said, what happened? Where'd they go? Did they drive away? He said, no, they pulled off down here. They parked in a parking lot. I said, well, go down there and give them some information. We have information that we give people, free information about resources, about all the free options that are available for them, about just the real story of what abortion is and how harmful it is, not just for the baby, but for the mothers who would go through with that procedure. So my friend walks down there to give them the information. Before I can even get off the phone with him, the young man in the car calls me. I'm surprised that he's calling me. I pick up the phone. I said, what's going on, man? What are you guys going to do? He said, we want to talk to Tori. I said, really? This has never happened to me before. He said, yeah, we want to talk to Tori. So I'm trying to keep it cool. I'm walking down there, but I want to run to where he is. I knock on his window. They get out there. They're kind of shaken. They're obviously still in a crisis situation, still feeling overwhelmed. I said, what happened? Why do you guys want to talk to Tori now? He said, I just really needed to hear what you said this morning. I needed to hear that. So I said, well, let's walk up the street. I don't want them to get back in their car. I don't want them to drive away. I said, let's walk up the street together. Tori's office is just a block and a half down the street. We start walking up there, and I start telling him the whole story. I start telling him, look, you don't understand everything God had to do for me to be here to talk to you. Man, I was at my R group last night, and we were talking about the story of the prodigal son. You ever heard the story of the prodigal son? I started telling him the story. I said, there's this father, and he loves his son, and his son is living far from him, and he's living recklessly, and he's making bad choices, but the father doesn't quit on him. And I looked at the young man as we were walking up the street, and I said, you don't understand that today so many things had to happen for God to see you from a long way off. And when you were feeling broken, and when you were feeling hopeless, and when you were feeling like there's no possible way to do the right thing in this situation, God ran towards you with open arms, and he gave you a big hug, and he said, you're my son, and I love you, and I have something so much better for you. And he's blown away. I'm blown away by what God is doing. We get to the top of the street. We go into Tori's office. She's a rock star like always, super loving, super kind, brings them in, welcomes them, start sharing about the options. And I said, hey, y'all, do you want me to stay with you? I know that you don't really know Tori, that this is all a lot happening at once. And the young man looked at me and he said, no. I want you to go back out there on the sidewalk. I hope that you'll be able to talk to even more people, help them make the right choice too. Incredible. I said, he's home. He gets it. He's home. Tori was able to set that young couple up with a mentor couple that's going to walk with them through this pregnancy, that's going to be there for them, pray for them, support them, encourage them in any way that they can. They were set up for free medical care through a local pregnancy resource center, ultrasounds, pregnancy test, all that stuff. They've been able to continue in contact with our local church. We've got them, they've attended a Revo service. They've been in talks about getting involved in our group themselves, life-giving Christian community to rally around them. The young man needed a job. That was one of his big prayer requests. He said, I don't have work. God has since answered that prayer, gotten him a job. And hear this, he's gotten promotion already. And he's only been there for a couple weeks. God is providing for that family. And I am so thankful that God pushed me out of the Christian bubble, that God prompted me to go out on that sidewalk on a day when it was cold and rainy, and I didn't really want to be there, and it was uncomfortable for me, but God had a plan. So that's one way that our church has been getting outside of the Christian bubble. Another really amazing way is through a local prayer walking outreach that we've been doing. So I was convicted recently at a training for local pastors and ministers that, there is a group of local missionaries overseas rather, that has been here locally since during COVID they weren't able to stay in country where they normally serve. And while they were in the Winston-Salem area, they recognized, hey, there's a large group of unreached people groups, specifically folks from South Asia who live here locally. And if we can't be on the mission field where we would normally be, we want to try to engage people locally. So they started doing weekly prayer walking. They would go out, meet, pray together, and go out into communities where they knew many of these South Asian peoples lived, and they would just offer to pray for them. They would share Jesus with them, just try to build relationships in any way that they could. During COVID, one of the most helpful ways that we found to engage people when prayer walking is just letting them know, hey, we know that it's been a very hard season for many people, that there are a lot of needs, that a lot of folks are hurting. And so we're local followers of Jesus, and we just wanted to come out and pray for people. Is there anything going on in your life that we could pray for? Well, when I heard that these missionaries who were stuck in Winston-Salem awaiting to be back in their country of service were doing this locally, I thought, wow, I live here all the time. This is my backyard. This is my mission field. If they're doing this when they're just stuck here for a short amount of time, how much more should I be doing this, someone who is a full-time resident here? So I started to go out and do some prayer walking with these folks, got opportunities to pray for people, opportunities to share the gospel with people. Other Revo members started coming out when they saw how life-giving it was for me and the folks who have been prayer walking. And then we were challenged, hey, we could do this in the Walkertown community where we have a church campus. We don't just have to do this in certain neighborhoods of the city. We could do this everywhere. You know, I started thinking, these are things that I would do on a mission trip. Why aren't I doing this in my own backyard? And so we've begun some weekly outreaches in the Walkertown area, prayer walking, specifically looking at communities where there are likely to be many people who are far from God. And it's been amazing the opportunities that God has given us. We've been able to pray for many people, encourage their faith. We've been able to share with people. We've gotten contact info to follow up with people. And I'm excited to see how God continues using that prayer walking ministry. And the third way that God's been prompting us to get outside of the Christian bubble is through a local box food outreach that we've done in the Walkertown area. You know, as Christians, we're called not just to meet people's spiritual needs, but to meet their material needs as well. And around the holidays, we partnered with some other local churches in Walkertown to prepare meals, everything that a family in need would need for a holiday meal, a really nice gift for them. And we called up the social workers of our local schools out there and just said, hey, if you had a list of families of people that would really be blessed by a meal for the holidays, families that you think might be in need, could you provide us that list? They said, sure, we'd love to help you. We'd love for you to partner with us to bless these families. So we got a list. One of our members called up all the folks on the list. We coordinated it. Because of COVID concerns, we did a kind of drive-through opportunity where families could come up, didn't even have to get out of their cars. We gave them all the meal, the supplies, everything that they would need, got an opportunity to pray for them, to learn about their needs, learn about ways that Revo can continue to meet their needs. And through follow-up with that, one of those families has gotten connected with Revo. It's a mom with several young children, single-parent household. She's come, she's brought her kids. She's really enjoyed the connection with the local church, been blessed by it. But let me tell you, her kids love being in our kids' ministry. They're so excited to be there that on Sundays when the mom has to work, the kids have just begged and begged, but we still want to be there. We've arranged for one of our members to pick them up and bring them. We had a baptism celebration recently at our Walkertown campus, and it was an opportunity for one of our children's ministry leaders to share very explicitly with that young man, the child, about the gospel, why we do baptism, what life following Jesus is all about, and he's learning all about it on his level. He can't get enough. He's eating it up. So with all of these opportunities, the thing that ties them together in my mind, something that God's really been impressing on me recently is, you know, they're all scheduled, planned, set things. So I would put on my calendar, okay, today I'm going to go out and I'm going to volunteer with this pro-life outreach. Or this Sunday afternoon, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do prayer walking, or we're going to set this box food outreach on our calendar. It's going to be this specific day. We'll have all the materials, everything ready. And it had me thinking, why is it that in our Christian lives so often we don't schedule this kind of intentional outreach? We don't schedule opportunities to get outside of our Christian bubble. You know, we schedule worship and we schedule Bible teaching, we schedule prayer, we schedule community, we schedule so many things. And yet we don't schedule this kind of intentional outreach. But I'm telling you, since it's been on my calendar's gotten a lot more exciting. And I don't miss anything that I'm having to give up in order to be outside of this Christian bubble and really on the front lines of life change in our community. And I give God all the glory, because I'm telling you, none of this stuff comes easy. It doesn't come easy to the folks in our church who have been involved in it, but it's so great. I love what one young lady says about the prayer walking that we've done. She says, you know, I never want to do this before I do it. So I look at my schedule and I'm always thinking, I don't really want to do this afternoon. But she said, every single time after I've done it, I'm so thankful that I've been a part of it. And I think that that's what God has for us. He has so much more life, so much more joy, so much more satisfaction and fulfillment as we schedule and are intentional about getting outside of our Christian bubble. I hope those stories are encouraging to you, and I'm excited to see what God's going to continue to do through our church and other local churches going forward.